Snow slid down the cafe window in slow, crooked lines, turning the city outside into a blur of white and gold. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and damp wool coats. He sat alone at the small wooden table by the glass, jacket draped carelessly over his shoulders like he was too tired to wear it properly. The cup in front of him had gone untouched for minutes, steam thinning into nothing. His reflection stared back at him from the dark window, eyes ringed with exhaustion, jaw clenched as if holding back something heavier than stress. People passed behind him, laughing, talking, living, but none of it reached him. His phone lay face down beside the cup, silent for once, yet his shoulders remained tense as if it might scream at any second. Years of control, decisions, pressure. Tonight they all pressed inward. His hand wrapped around the mug, not to drink, just to feel something warm, something steady. The city expected him to be unbreakable. Sitting there, he felt dangerously close to proving it wrong. A shadow paused beside his table. He sensed it before he heard it, the slight hesitation, the quiet intake of breath. Someone noticed. His eyes stayed on the window, heart beating a little faster, irritation and vulnerability mixing in his chest. Then a soft voice cut through the hum of the cafe, careful but honest, and the moment shifted, like the first crack in ice that's been holding too long. "You look tired." Her voice was low, almost afraid to exist, like she might take the words back if he reacted the wrong way. He lifted his eyes slowly, irritation ready on his tongue, then stopped. She wasn't staring at him the way people usually did, curious, impressed, calculating. Her gaze held something softer, something bruised. The cafe lights caught the pale strands escaping her tied-back hair, and for a second she looked as worn as he felt. She swallowed, fingers tightening around the small order slip until it bent. "Like my husband," she continued, then hesitated, breath catching. The pause was heavy, loaded. "Before he left." The last words came out quieter, stripped of decoration. Not dramatic, just true. The space between them filled with something sharp and fragile, and he felt it cut deeper than any boardroom loss. His chest tightened without permission. He hadn't expected that kind of honesty from a stranger, especially not one paid to keep things pleasant and brief. He searched her face and saw it, the careful posture of someone who had learned how to stand. After collapse, the practiced calm over something still bleeding. She realized she had said too much and tried to smile it away, but it didn't reach her eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved. The cafe noise dulled, like the world had leaned back to listen. He forgot the cold coffee, the weight of his name, the constant war in his head. All he could see was the woman standing there, grief exposed in a single sentence, and the strange, unsettling truth that she had seen him more clearly in 5 seconds than anyone had in years. She didn't wait for a reply, as if she already knew there wasn't one that could fix what she'd opened. Instead, she shifted her weight slightly, eyes dropping to the table, then back to him, steady but guarded. He said nothing, yet something in his silence invited her to stay. The snow outside thickened, muting the city further, sealing them inside a quieter world. "My husband used to sit like that," she said after a moment, voice barely above the hum of the espresso machine, staring at nothing, carrying everything. Her lips curved into a faint smile that didn't belong to happiness. "I thought it was just work. I thought we had time." The words weren't aimed at him anymore. They were confessions released into the air because there was finally space for them. He listened, really listened, the way he hadn't listened to anyone in years. No fixing, no calculating, no planning his response. Just the sound of her voice and the ache underneath it. Each sentence chipped away at the armor he wore so well. He recognized the late nights she described, the promises delayed, the belief that love could wait until tomorrow. His throat tightened as he realized how closely her past mirrored the path he was still walking. Outside, a bus roared past, light streaking across the glass like a memory rushing by too fast to catch. She finished speaking and exhaled, as if she hadn't realized how long she'd been holding her breath. He met her eyes again, and in that silent exchange, something fragile formed. Two strangers standing on opposite sides of loss, recognizing the same fear, that leaving, even slowly, could still mean never coming back. The cafe door slammed open, dragging winter inside with it. Cold air rushed across the floor, rattling cups and snapping the fragile stillness apart. A man stood in the doorway, breathless, coat half-buttoned, eyes wild as they locked onto the CEO. "There you are," he said too loudly, panic cutting through the warmth of the room. Heads turned, The world rushed back in all at once. The CEO's body reacted before his mind did, spine straightening, jaw setting, instincts snapping into place like armor. The assistant crossed the room fast, words tumbling out in urgent fragments. The board was fighting. The numbers were collapsing. Decisions were being made without him, and none of them were good. Every sentence sounded like a countdown. Every second away felt expensive. He pushed his chair back halfway, caught between standing and staying. His gaze flicked to the window, to the snow still falling, then to her. She was already stepping back, hands clasped in front of her apron, grief retreating behind practiced professionalism. She gave a small nod, understanding too well what it meant to be pulled away by duty. The flicker in her eyes hurt more than the assistant's words. For a heartbeat, the room held its breath. This was the moment he knew intimately, the one where he always chose responsibility, urgency, the future that demanded everything. His chest tightened as he felt the familiar pull, the same pull she had just warned him about. The assistant waited, tense, certain of the outcome. The cafe noise swelled again, impatient. And yet something inside him resisted, trembling on the edge of a different choice. He lowered himself back into the chair, slow but deliberate, the wood creaking softly beneath the weight of the decision. The assistant froze, disbelief flickering across his face. But the CEO didn't look at him again. His eyes were on her. Relief washed over her features in an unguarded wave, like she'd been bracing for impact and the blow never came. For a second, she forgot to hide it. The assistant spoke his name once more, quieter now, almost pleading, then fell silent. The CEO raised a single hand without turning, a calm, final gesture. The crisis could wait. For the first time in his life, he let it. The tension that had lived in his shoulders for years loosened, replaced by something unfamiliar and fragile, peace edged with fear. She sat across from him, the chair scraping softly, hands trembling as they settled on the table. The cafe lights felt warmer now, closer, casting gentle shadows on her face. When he reached for her hand, it wasn't dramatic, just careful, as if asking permission. Her fingers curled around his, grounding him in a way no contract or victory ever had. Outside, snow continued to fall, quiet and relentless, erasing tracks as quickly as they were made. Inside, two lives paused at the same moment, choosing presence over escape. Nothing was fixed. Nothing was promised. But in the stillness between them, something new took its first breath, and for once neither of them looked away. The assistant lingered by the counter, phone vibrating relentlessly in his palm, eyes darting between the screen and the man who was no longer moving toward him. When he finally understood, his shoulders sagged, defeat mixing with respect. He muttered a quick apology to no one in particular, and turned for the door, urgency dragging him away as the bell chimed sharply behind him. The sound echoed, then faded, taking the weight of the outside world with it. The cafe settled into a quieter rhythm. Cups clinked softly. Steam hissed low and steady. She let out a small laugh before she could stop herself, the kind that escaped when tension snapped instead of breaking. Her hand rose to cover her mouth, embarrassed by the sound, as if joy itself had become unfamiliar. "They usually don't wait," she said, nodding toward the door, voice light but layered with disbelief. Men like him never stayed. Life had taught her that. He watched her closely, something tightening in his chest at the honesty of the moment. "Neither do I," he replied, the words leaving him before he could filter them. Saying it out loud felt dangerous, like admitting a flaw he'd spent years hiding. The truth settled heavily between them, not awkward, just real. For once he wasn't performing strength. He was choosing stillness, and it terrified him almost as much as it relieved him. Their eyes met again, longer this time. The world outside continued without him. Meetings, markets, consequences, but inside the cafe, time bent around the quiet space they shared. He felt the strange, unfamiliar pull of staying. Not out of obligation, but because leaving suddenly felt like the greater loss. They began to talk, slow at first, words chosen carefully as if speaking too quickly might shatter the fragile calm. He learned her name, simple and soft, and she learned his, spoken without the weight of titles or expectations. Each syllable felt heavy with relief and curiosity, the kind that comes when two people recognize the same ache in each other. Outside, the snow had thinned to gentle flakes, drifting lazily against the streetlights, giving the night a forgiving glow. She spoke of the nights that had seemed endless, of rooms filled with silence that pressed like a living thing. He admitted how fear had haunted him in empty boardrooms, how decisions were easier than connections. and how isolation had become a habit he no longer wanted. The cafe around them blurred into insignificance, the low hum of conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine becoming a background heartbeat to their exchange. Each confession drew them closer, not in grand gestures but in the simple gravity of being seen. Her eyes flickered with warmth he hadn't allowed himself to notice in years, and his chest loosened in a way that startled him. The tension that had built for months, the constant, quiet fear that life demanded, everything from him started to dissolve in the shared recognition that someone else understood. By the time the night deepened, the moments felt suspended. Words had given them shape. Presence had given them courage. And the snow outside whispered promises neither dared speak aloud. He realized he didn't need to leave yet. The city, the chaos, and even the responsibilities could wait. Here, in the stillness of this tiny cafe, something fragile and real had begun to root itself, and both of them held their breath, not daring to break the spell. When the cafe began stacking chairs, the sound cut through them like a quiet warning. Wood scraped against tile, lights dimmed one by one, and the warmth that had held them together started to thin. They stood near the door, closer than strangers, not close enough to name it. He adjusted his coat but didn't put it on. She wiped the counter one last time, slower than necessary, as if time might soften if handled carefully. Neither spoke. Leaving felt heavier than staying. At the door he hesitated, hand hovering near the handle. A man who could sign billion-dollar deals but couldn't find the courage to end a moment that mattered. Goodbyes had a way of finalizing things, of turning fragile connections into memories. Before he could force the word out, she reached past him and opened the door herself. Cold air rushed in, sharp and honest, filling the space between them. Snow brushed her hair, her cheeks flushed, eyes steady.
"Stay," she said, quiet, unguarded.
Not a plea, not a promise, just a door left open. He didn't answer. He stepped into the night beside her instead, the city humming low, lights glowing through falling snow. The future pressed at the edges of his mind. Meetings, decisions, consequences, but for once, it didn't own him. Tonight didn't need fixing or defining. Tonight, standing there with her breath visible in the cold,